I'd like to welcome everybody to Clergy Talk Podcast. The world wants to know, and all the glory goes to God. On today's episode, I have Dr. Thiel on my show. He's been on here once before. He's an author, he's a writer, he has a website that offers a bunch of theological material. And guess what? It's all free. But the book, I don't know about that. But with that being said, take it away, Dr. Thiel.
Well, thanks again for having me on. One of the reasons I ended up coming on sooner is we discussed the possibility that by if we got a new pope, that I would put out a
Mm,
book. And a couple of reasons it was like maybe I should have waited a little longer for the book, but actually I got the book out. It was actually available for sale within hours of the new pope being announced.
wow.
And the reason I was able to do that, and I had written a book about Francis too. The reason I was able to do this is I pre-wrote the book, I had it edited, and throughout the book I called this guy Pope XXXX. Okay,
Mm,
so once I knew that, I replaced it. But then, of course, I needed specifics about him. So the second
mm,
chapter was a bit more specific about him. And the information that I wanted to find wasn't too difficult to find. I put it in there.
mm,
And with this book, I'll show up this book. Now, this book talks about various prophecies and predictions and some things. And we can also talk about some doctrine of this particular pope versus perhaps the last one. And what's interesting is that some people believe that the last pope, Francis, didn't count.
mm,
Okay.
mm.
Now, others say that's nonsense, of course, but here's their logic. And it goes like this: you're not supposed to vote for a pope if there's a pope still alive. We wait until they die.
Hmm.
And Benedict XVI was alive for many years after Francis came in. So a lot of people say Francis didn't count.
Okay.
Okay. Now,
Wow.
count for what? That's where it gets a little weird. Now, I want to make it clear to your audience, I do not rely on non-biblical prophecies. We're going to talk about some, but and what I believe is throughout history, Satan, the devil, and his demons have influenced various people who claim to be prophets and seers. And
Mm,
sometimes they give them true information, and sometimes they give them false information, and sometimes they mix it all together.
I agree.
Okay, all right. Well, once upon a time, in this case, it's precisely in the 12th century, in the year 1139, I believe it was, an Irish bishop, a Roman Catholic bishop,
Hmm.
by the name of Malachy, traveled from Ireland, it was kind of in Northern Ireland, down to Italy, and he went to Rome, and he was going to go meet with the Pope.
Hmm.
On his way there, he ended up on a hill or a mountain, and he claimed to have a vision. And in this vision, he wrote down basically 112 statements.
Hmm.
And each of these statements was supposed to be a prediction for a pope. Okay. Now, these statements are in Latin. And even though I did study Latin, I won't try to read them in Latin because one, nobody speaks it really. And two, it wouldn't help your audience because probably most of them don't know Latin. Uh, so we'll skip that part. But anyway, so he does this list and it predicts all the popes, including some anti-popes, by the way,
Hmm.
from the year 1143
Okay.
to more or less our time. And so now what happens is it's interesting with modern scholarship. I put that in quotes because I've been doing some other research that has been driving me nuts about what so-called scholars say about the book of Daniel and other
Mm,
things. They don't,
mm.
okay,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
consensus of the atheist, anti-God scholars, of course, is there's no such thing as miracles. Like for the book of Daniel, for example,
Right.
these frauds go out and tell us, you go to Wikipedia and it says the consensus of scholars, modern scholarship, is that Daniel's book was not written until about the year 165 BC
Yeah. I heard that. Yeah.
because these events, he was too accurate. There's no way God could have known this. Of course, God knows everything, right? This is what they say.
Hmm.
I'm going to digress and talk about that, and I'll get back to the Pope. What's interesting is this week, the Smithsonian
Mm-hmm.
put out something, actually, I guess it was last week, where they did a new type of analysis of the handwriting for a fragment from the Dead Sea Scrolls of the book of
Mm.
Daniel.
Okay.
Now, it turns out that they say that this fragment is dated from maybe 160, but perhaps to 230 BC. Now,
Hmm.
if it was 230 BC or anywhere close to that, that
Mm-hmm.
was absolutely positively before any of the events that they're discounting happened, which shows these fraudulent scholars are wrong. Of course, we already know it's wrong. And
Right.
the other thing that's interesting about this piece is that it's actually written in Greek, and Daniel wasn't written in Greek. The same article for Wikipedia, by the way, says that the book of Daniel was written in Hebrew and Aramaic. That's
Right.
true.
Right.
But
Right.
we have, from perhaps the third century, one written in Greek, which means it was a translation of what was originally written, which means what was originally written was older than that.
Wow. Wow. That's exciting.
Yes. And I mention that because, I've just started doing a sermon series on Daniel. And the morning I was going to do this, I, by accident or divine intervention, I ran into this thing about the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, I had
Hmm.
no idea it said anything about Daniel. Okay.
Hmm.
I just saw a headline said, Dead Sea Scrolls may be older than we think. Okay. Let me take a look at that because there's various reasons that's important. Could be important. Then I saw stuff about Daniel. I said, wait a second. This is the same Daniel these frauds say he couldn't have written this
Hmm.
early, but the Daniel didn't write it. It was anyway. So anyway, that's going to modern scholars. Well, why do I bring up the stuff about modern scholars? Because they also don't believe that demons exist either.
Right.
Okay?
Right. I
They
know
don't
that
believe
part.
God can
Yeah.
inspire something or demons or whatever.
Yeah.
So the consensus of modern scholars, including many Roman Catholic ones, as opposed to older ones like 100
Mm.
years or so ago or 50 years ago, they were more, they accepted the fact that there were prophecies.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anyway, modern scholars now go out and say, okay, the list that this book talks about, this guy named Malachy, okay,
Mm-hmm.
that it was discovered in the Vatican archives in the year 1590, and therefore it's a fraud. It wasn't really written in the 1100s because it was
Mm.
too accurate for all the popes
Mm.
prior to that. It was
Okay.
too accurate, therefore it's a fraud. Okay, it's not a fraud, I don't believe. I can't. It seems incredulous to me that they could say this because if you look at other popes after 1590,
Mm-hmm.
it was very, very accurate. I bought a
Mm.
book written by a Roman Catholic by the name of Peter Bander. It came out in like 1966 or 8 or 9, something like that. And he put the Latin down and explained how, many of these popes met this. Okay. So that was interesting. And so to me, it helps demonstrate it was not a fraud. But
Mm.
more than that, remember, I told you the book was written in the late 1960s. Well, I said, okay, well, what about popes in my lifetime?
Right.
Okay, so this is after this guy's book. And the first one was of the half moon. Okay, this seems kind of a weird thing in Latin to write about a pope.
Mm.
Turns out we had a pope was uh, elected during a half moon. The half moon is more than one day; it's a couple of days for a half moon or a few days. And it
Okay.
turns out he died 33 days later, also on a half moon.
Wow.
That was John Paul the First.
Okay.
So I thought, okay, well, this kind of seems to fit. What about John Paul the Second? Well, the Latin for it translates to be of the labor of the sun. So there are two interpretations of this for John Paul II. One is he traveled around the world more than any other pope had ever done. So that's one way. But the other, which is peculiar and really weird, he was born on the day of a solar eclipse, and he either died or was buried on a day of a solar eclipse. Yeah,
Wow.
right. That's what I'm thinking. It's like, okay.
All right.
So it's like, all right, there's something to this. What about the next one? No, now that was number 109 and 110. Number 11, to the glory of the olives. What's that got to do with? Turns out there's an order within Roman Catholicism called Benedictines, and
Hmm.
they are the order of the olive. And they always said that they were going to have a pope. Well, they didn't quite have one, but the last guy took the name Benedict. Not the last guy, but the one before. So that makes
Okay.
him number 111. So the question is could Francis be the last one, number 112? Well, we know he died and there's a new one, so obviously he wasn't the last one.
Right.
And while he was still alive, a Roman Catholic writer that I read, an educated writer, said Francis is not on the Malachy list. And I agree with that. So there's a couple of ways to explain this. One, the demons just intentionally left somebody off. Two, he didn't count because he wasn't elected at the time. Or three,
Hmm.
because Benedict was alive. But three is, and this goes back to over a century ago. The
Hmm.
Catholic Encyclopedia talking about the Malachy list says it doesn't say there's nobody between 111 and 112. So maybe there would be others in a
Hmm.
sense. Now, so this leaves us to the current guy. His name is, he picked Leo the 14th. He selected it because of Leo the 13th. We'll get to that a
Okay.
bit later. Now, I don't know if he's the last pope or not. Okay. He could be, and my book tells you basically what to look for to know if he really is going to be the last one. Now, getting back to various prophecies, and lest this sound like Catholic bashing, because that's what I'll probably be accused of. Roman Catholics have a bunch of prophecies that there's going to be an anti-pope who rises up, and a pope could be the final antichrist.
Hmm.
These are from Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox Catholic prophecies, mostly
Okay.
Roman Catholic prophecies. Okay, Roman
Hmm.
Catholics are the ones who accept the pope as the guy. The
Okay.
Eastern Orthodox think he's got a position, but not quite the
Okay.
way they do it. So my book details a whole bunch of these prophecies and predictions about an anti-pope and possibly being the antichrist.
Hmm.
Now, officially, according to the Catholic Encyclopedia from like 1912, they've had 30 anti-popes. Okay,
That many?
yep, that many. But they haven't had one for about 500 years, according to the official position.
Hmm.
Now, as it turns out, some people there's a couple different definitions of anti-pope. The primary one is when there's two popes at the same time. And they decided not to worry about that with Francis and Benedict, at least the Vatican itself didn't do it.
Okay.
But I proposed in a book I wrote regarding Francis back in 2013 that you could be an anti-pope if you were the pope, but you didn't really believe the Roman Catholic faith. You're a faker.
Okay.
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 You got there, you didn't really believe in it. You wanted power. Somehow you got it through the ranks as a bishop, then a cardinal. You got yourself elected. You didn't
Hmm.
believe it. Now, to see, you don't have to take my word for the fact that this could be a reality because during the reign of Francis, several Roman Catholics, priests, were put out, and one bishop, archbishop, were put
Hmm.
out of the Roman Catholic Church because they said this guy is an anti-pope. And they didn't mean it because Benedict was alive, but mostly because he held positions that they were convinced were in conflict with the Roman Catholic faith.
Hmm.
Now, so far with Leo the 14th, we don't have that. See, he's not made any strong statements that make it clear that he's doesn't believe in the Roman Catholic faith. So we don't know yet about him on that particular part.
Okay.
A weird coincidence, though, about him. My middle son says to me, Dad, he's got your name. I said, well, not really. He said, well, your name's Robert, right? I said, yes. Is his name Robert? I said, yes. I said, but actually, he said, son, he's got my father's name.
Hmm.
Well, why is that? I said, because my father is Robert Francis. And this guy, his name is Robert Francis Prevost. And my father's name, of course, is Robert Francis Thiel.
Okay.
So, and I told my father that joke. I was back in Michigan a week or so back when I told him about that. I thought that was kind of funny. It's just a strange coincidence, that's all. So I'm watching this guy trying to see what he's going to do. And he's been interesting. A couple of things I've warned about he might do, he's doing. And that is he's very ecumenical. Now, before being elected as pontiff, his
Hmm.
plan was to go to Fatima, Portugal on the 13th of May of 2025. Now, for you and your listeners, you may recall this that in Fatima, Portugal in 1917, three little shepherd children claimed to see an apparition, a lady. She showed up
Read that.
once a month.
Yeah, I read that. Yeah, I read that.
Okay. Matter of fact, actually, I told you I wrote another book. I actually wrote a book about that. We'll get to that in a minute.
Okay. Yeah, yeah,
All
yeah. I
right.
read that one.
So anyway, according to uh, uh, what I've read, is that so when he was the cardinal, Prevost was going to go to Fatima on that day, but because he got elected pope, he didn't go. And I mention this because he spoke at a Marian thing less than a week ago, so recently, and he's pushing a particular version of Mary. Now, he meaning Leo the 14th said, by the way, he took his name from Leo the 13th. Now, Leo the 13th, quote, influenced, this is from my book, and I got this from another quote. I'm quoting in my book here. He influenced the Mariology of the Catholic Church and promoted both the rosary and the scapular. Now, you probably are not familiar with, you probably have heard of rosaries. Okay,
Yeah.
that's not that unknown, but the scapular is not something that regular people would know about. Well, the rosary and the scapular have to do with basically, I call them good luck charms.
Mm.
All right. Now, Roman Catholics I know say they were not good luck charms, but basically it helps you prevent. Let me read you a quote from one of their leaders named Simon Stock. Hold on. I had the right part about this here. Just a moment. Okay. Whoever dies clothed in that, if you're wearing a brown scapular when you die, will never suffer eternal fire.
Hmm.
So you don't have to worry about Jesus, or if you're into Mary, just have to wear this brown scapular and you'll never suffer eternal fire.
Oh, that's interesting.
And blasphemous.
Yeah.
Yes. And that was something. And that anyway, that was promoted by Leo the 13th.
Mm.
Some of this stuff, and so we've got Leo the 14th. So he might be very Marian along those lines.
Okay.
And again, he didn't get to go to Fatima on the 13th. By the way, May 13th was the first time this apparition supposedly appeared. No,
Right.
I shouldn't say supposedly. I absolutely positively believe that something showed up once a month for 6 months. Okay. Now, here's
Yep.
something. Yeah, I'm convinced something did show up, and these three little kids saw it. By the way, to shock your listeners, as well as particularly Roman Catholic ones, this
Hmm.
creature was only about 3 foot tall. It
Hmm.
didn't look like you've seen in the movies, number one, in terms of size. And number two, it didn't say it was Mary. Never said it
Wow.
was Mary. It said it
Wow.
was the lady.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So it didn't say it was Mary, but people just decided that it was. Now, I'm going to show you the back cover of this book.
Okay.
Why? Because I'm going to show you the statue that they send around the world, claiming it's the Fatima statue, and it's one that one of the popes put a crown on. But next to it, I'm going to show you something else. All right. My wife took this picture right here when we were at
Okay.
Fatima, Portugal. This is what everybody wants to think the lady looked like when it showed up. Let me see if I can get it a little closer to make it bigger.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And then one of the popes crowned her as the Queen of Heaven, which, of course, we know in the Old Testament warns against the Queen
Uh-oh.
of Heaven, but we'll skip that for right now. Now, what's this?
I don't know what that is.
That's what showed up.
Oh my goodness.
Now, people say, how dare you say that? Well, there were only three people who said they saw it, and all three of them described it this way.
Wow.
Now, Jesus' mother Mary did not appear like that. Now, while being dressed like that is not uncommon in modern Western societies,
Yeah.
in 1917 Portugal, you never saw that part of a woman.
Mm-mm.
Okay, not even harlots would dress like that in public. It was not possible. That's what it showed up. It looked a lot like the goddess Diana, and everything here comes from the descriptions, the only descriptions that we have.
Mm.
Now, who were those descriptions given to, and who made the reports? The priests. There were two priests. There was the parish priest, Guerrera, and he was convinced this was from the devil. He did not believe that this was from God.
Okay.
What happened was, after the first time, I think a couple of people came the second time to watch. Nobody saw anything, by the way, the first several times. And some people then claimed when they went to the site, when Mary supposedly showed up, or the lady showed up, because they didn't really say it was Mary, that they got healed. So the Roman Catholic Church tried to figure out what to do about this.
Mm.
Now, Lucia, the oldest of the children, she thought it might be the devil. Her mother thought it might be the devil. The parish
Mm.
priest thought it was demonic also.
Hmm.
But they finally sent this guy over. His name was Canon Formajon. Canon kind of means he's a priest who was a lawyer, kind of a canonical lawyer. And he actually wrote, and I have a quote in this book about this, okay, that Jacinta, that's one of the other children, confirms that the lady's skirt only went to the knee. That she must be mistaken, because if this is true, this was demonic. Well, duh. All three of them, the only three people who said they saw the apparition, said it had a short skirt.
Wow. Wow. Who the three witnesses? We got three witnesses.
And all three said that. Now,
Wow. Wow.
tell you about an unusual coincidence. We're in Fatima,
Mm.
and I asked somebody at the hotel where we should go out to eat for dinner that night.
Mm-hmm.
And then she tells me to go to some restaurant, which, as it turns out, wasn't very good for us, but we'll get to that. Doesn't matter. But we get to it, we drive over there, and I guess we get there about 20 minutes too early.
Hmm.
You know, so my wife and I are, well, what should we do? I said, oh, there's a cemetery across the street. Now, we usually don't visit cemeteries. Okay. I know it's a
Okay.
place, look, we all know places or cemeteries are the one place people are dying to get into. Old joke, right? Anyway, so we thought, well, we're here, let's look. And they had cemeteries were different than the ones been in the United States. They were nicer. Okay. A lot of marble, lots of different things. And I finally found a gravestone, a very small one, for the parish priest from Fatima. Okay,
Okay.
so I saw that. But that guy called Canon Formaggio, the one who said, the kids have to be wrong because otherwise this would be demonic, he ended up promoting Fatima big time.
Hmm.
He has a mausoleum type thing, big
Wow.
fancy thing. Now, of course,
Wow.
he supposedly had a vow of poverty. I don't know how he could have afforded it, but somehow, probably because he promoted Fatima so much, he's got this nice big fancy thing over there. And I never would have run into it except the restaurant was closed. We had time
Hmm.
to kill. and
Wow.
and the
Wow.
other funny coincidence about it
Hmm.
is that the cemetery was supposed to have been closed at that time, but either they didn't lock it or they forgot to lock it. So we just went in and we didn't know. Oh, that's right. Toward the end, I think that some cemetery guy came over to us and told us it was supposed to be closed. And at that time, it was time to go to the restaurant. At that stage, I knew a few words of Portuguese,
Hmm.
probably 50 words, 100, whatever I knew, but maybe a couple hundred. So I could understand him. So anyway, but that gets back to my concern about this particular pope. Now, on
Hmm.
one hand, I'm going to tell you the good and the bad at the same time. within a few days of becoming Pope, within a week anyway, he met with what you call the Eastern Rite churches. Now, what is
Okay.
Eastern Rite? This is RITE, not RIGHT. It's got nothing to do with right wing, left wing,
Okay.
nothing like the United States. Now, there's two different Easters I want to talk about.
Mm.
One is the Eastern Orthodox Church. They do
Okay.
not accept the Pope. They are not in communion with Rome, but they get along fairly well. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
They've had problems, but they get along. But the other are the Eastern Rite churches.
Mm.
These are churches who accept the Pope as their guy, but they have different practices. They do some things differently with their church service. They do various other they observe some other holidays sometimes differently and all this kind of stuff.
Okay.
So they're different, but they're part of it. So when he met with them, and so I'm going to tell you it's a good in my opinion. When Leo the 14th met with them, he told them that they should hold to their original traditions, and he was very glad that they did and that they
Mm.
should do so. Now, my comment to Pope Leo the 14th, should I ever see him, is I would like him to do what the Apostle Jude wrote. In the book of Jude, verse 3, it says, to contend earnestly for the faith once for all delivered to the saints. Now, as it turns out, the original Eastern Rite Church, which is not in communion with Rome,
Mm.
holds the original beliefs. And that's what I wish Leo would adhere to. But at least the fact that he actually met with other Eastern Rite groups and said to hold to the original pretty much, or their early traditions, gives me a glimmer, not much, but a small glimmer of hope that
Mm-hmm.
perhaps he will look back at original Christianity.
Okay.
Now, your audience may or not be aware of this, but this year marks the 1700th anniversary of the Council of Nicaea.
Yep.
Now, the Council of Nicaea was called by an unbaptized emperor by the name of Constantine.
Yep.
He
That's a
wasn't
barn burner.
baptized.
It's a barn burner right there.
He wasn't baptized. He uh, basically under imperial edict had 300, I think it's 318 bishops showed up,
Mm-hmm.
and he told them his positions on certain things, and he decided, by the way, he was a bishop too. He hadn't been
Okay.
baptized, but he was a lay bishop, so he oversaw the Council of Nicaea, and they went over various things, including various one thing. I think they had one or two things I agreed with, but many things I did not.
Mm.
What I agreed with is that Unitarianism is wrong. I agree with that. Okay,
Okay.
Jesus is God, the Father is God. Okay, so that part I would agree with. He came up with a couple of Greek terms he used I wouldn't necessarily agree with, but one of the bigger ones, the one I want to talk about, I think is relevant to the new Pope,
Mm-hmm.
is the date of what we now call it the date of Easter. Your audience may not know this because I was shocked. I was raised Roman Catholic. I did not know that Easter was supposed to be Passover. Now, maybe you knew this, maybe you didn't. I had no clue. Now, the
Mm.
Eastern Orthodox know this because they use the word Pascha. And in Spanish and in Portuguese and stuff like that, the word is something like Passover or Pascha or something
Mm-hmm.
like that. So
Mm-hmm.
you know it's supposed to be Passover. Well, in the English language, it changed the name after the goddess of the morning,
Right.
Eostre, is how I
Right.
would
Right.
pronounce her name. So we got Easter. But anyway, they argued about it. Now, we may have a different opinion than you do on the topic, but the original date of Passover was actually the evening on the Hebrew calendar of the
Right.
14th day of the first month of the
Okay.
biblical calendar. And the issue at the time, Constantine wanted unity. And he said, wait a second, we got some people who do this on Sunday instead of doing it on the biblical date. What should we do? And they agreed to go on Sunday, which I think is wrong. I think I can prove it's wrong, but that's a whole other matter. So they did that. Now, why is that relevant now? For lots of reasons, one of which is that while the Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholics kept the same day
Mm-hmm.
for a long time, there was a calendar switch. And so now the Eastern Orthodox usually, not all,
Mm-hmm.
usually keep it about a month later.
Mm-hmm.
In 2025, it happened to be on the same day. And so there have been discussions between the Roman Catholics and Eastern Orthodox Catholics to come up with the same day again.
Mm-hmm.
And if they, there's a chance that perhaps this year, since they are celebrating the 1700th anniversary of the Council of Nicaea,
Mm-hmm.
it's possible that they might agree on the same date. Now, my hope and prayer for both Leo the 14th and Patriarch Bartholomew of Constantinople
Mm-hmm.
is that they would both contend earnestly for the original faith and switch to the 14th of Nisan for this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Again, I will hold out a glimmer of hope for that, small hope, because that could possibly happen. Now, turns out back in 2000, I think it's 2008, my wife and I were in Turkey, and we visited many of the 7 churches of Revelation.
Okay.
And we've been to Turkey a couple of times, maybe 3 times, whatever. So we've been to all those churches. Well, we were in Istanbul, and I said to my wife, we should try to go and see where the Patriarch of Constantinople is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now, if you go to Rome, you ask anybody where the Vatican is, everybody knows. Okay, Vatican City. In Istanbul, you ask the average Turkish taxi driver where the Patriarch of Constantinople is, they don't have a clue. Now, we
Wow.
were there before people had cell phone, smartphones.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of tried to find something on a map, and they dropped us off somewhere around there. So my wife and I walked over. We finally found it. We had to go up a hill and around a bend and all this. And it's not nearly as big as Vatican City, but we went there.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason to bring this up is, unlike St. Peter's Square, the Vatican, which has got zillions of people all the time, it's like almost nobody's there visiting. I'm not even sure if there was more. There might have been 1 or 2 other couples, maybe nobody else other than my wife and I.
Wow.
So we're there, and I luck out. How do we luck out? There's a guy who's there. He happens to be from the bizarre land known as San Diego, California. Right. While I know some Greek, I really appreciated having a guy. He was less than 30. He was in his upper 20s, and he spoke perfect English. So I only know a couple words of Turkish, and on a good day, maybe 100 words, 200 words of Greek. So, but he was fluent. And so we asked him some questions, or I asked him a bunch of questions. He showed us around, my wife and I around, and I asked him about him and about their church and the Roman Catholic Church. And he said to me, well, when Benedict the 16th was here, his people said to our people, look, you Church of Rome, if you'll compromise on 6 or 8 different things we doctrinally disagree on, maybe we can have unity. And he said that what Benedict's people told him is the Roman Catholic Church would change every doctrine that disagrees with the Eastern Orthodox to the Eastern Orthodox position under one condition. Want to guess?
The building.
If they'll accept the Pope as
Oh, wow. Okay.
so they didn't get an agreement then, but it seems to start the wheels in motion. And so my concern about unity is, okay, talk about Leo here.
Right.
He talked about unity his first day. He talked about unity yesterday, the day before, and he's really pushing unity. And the Patriarch Bartholomew, who I mentioned before, indicated if you don't accept if you're not in favor of this unity, you're following the devil. And Francis
Mm.
kind of implied that as well. But we're supposed to want to be united in what the Bible teaches. And that's not what they're talking. They're just talking about we're going to, we'll compromise on this, you compromise on that.
Mm.
Sounds a lot like the world's politics.
Mm.
I'm doing a sermon series I mentioned before on the book of Daniel. And one of the things I was reading today before we went on here was when the politicians in Daniel's day, they didn't like Daniel probably because he was too honest. All right.
Right.
And
Right.
they couldn't get away with stuff. So they said, look, there's only one way we can deal with this Daniel guy. That's got to do with his God. What is it that we can do? So they go up to Nebuchadnezzar, no, Darius, excuse me, Darius at this stage. They go
Mm-hmm.
up to this guy named Darius and say, Darius, you are the greatest. Everybody loves you. We love you so much. We all want to worship you. All of your government officials think you should build this image for yourself, and
Right.
people will bow down to it because you're just the one. Now Darius, that's his flattery worked apparently on Darius,
Mm-hmm.
so he puts up with this nonsense, and they build this, and immediately they go and see what's Daniel going to do. I'm going to look behind me see if I can see something. I don't see it. I have a book. Let's see what's here. No, don't have it here. I should have brought it here.
Mm.
Uh, Called Prayer, What Does the Bible Teach? Which, by the way, is
Mm.
free at ccog.org. And it has a picture of Daniel, not really Daniel, but an artist's interpretation of Daniel praying. And Daniel didn't compromise in prayer because of this rule.
Right. Right.
And so they go and they get him arrested and go into the lion. He gets thrown in the lion's den, etc. And of course, God protected him. But the point is, Daniel didn't compromise. He still, I'm supposed to pray to God. I'm not going to pray to this idol. And when there's ecumenical discussions about various groups, they need to go back to the Bible.
Right. Right.
And otherwise, it's a political thing. And there's been a lot of politics between the Eastern Orthodox and the Roman Catholics throughout the ages, including the Crusades. That was a
Mm.
political thing too, to a great degree. And so my prayer again for the leaders of both of those churches is they'll do what their Bibles say, which is to
Mm.
contend earnestly for the faith once for all delivered to the saints. And again, I saw a glimmer, maybe a glimmer of hope
Mm.
with Leo the 14th, and we'll see what they end up doing. I'm not holding my breath, um, but I'm watching. Jesus said to watch, and I think Leo the 14th is one to
Mm.
watch. He's out there. He's being ecumenical. He's leaning too much toward Mary. I wish people would go back to the Bible. Because Mary, who's the mother of Jesus, that's true, but she does not assist with salvation, for example, which is a
Mm.
position a lot of people think. They think she's the mediator or the mediatrix between us and God, whereas the Bible
Right.
says there's only one mediator, that's Jesus.
Right. Exactly. Yep. So that's a serious topic right there for the Eastern Orthodox and Catholicism to address that. Right now is rooted into their teaching, so it's going to be kind of hard to get them to take another position on that. I
Again,
guess I guess we'll see, right?
yeah. Um, Again, I'm not overly optimistic, but I won't rule it out because what will happen is, presuming it doesn't happen now, the Bible talks about the rise of the two witnesses, and
Hmm.
the two witnesses will do various signs and whatever, and the Bible talks about various multitudes, nations, languages, etc., tongues and peoples coming out of the Great Tribulation.
Mm-hmm.
So many people will change then. Uh, I urge people to change now, not wait
Right,
until that
right,
time.
right, 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 right. Wow, wow. Well, eschatology is another 2 hour show.
Are you kidding? I can talk about eschatology for probably weeks.
Yeah, exactly. You know, when you gotta unpack everything and unpack all the different viewpoints from all the different, schools of thought with amongst our theological brethren and stuff. So, yeah, that's a pretty serious topic. Yeah.
Now, one thing I was going to mention, though, if I can find it here, is I was talking about the prophecies that they have regarding the last pope. So I'd like to read that one. I was telling you about the Malachy prophecies.
Right, right.
And what's interesting about the Malachy prophecies is that there's instead of writing like 3 or 4 words, there was more about the last guy than all the rest.
Hmm.
The last guy is called Peter the Roman. Now, a lot of people think that the last pope will not call himself Peter the Roman. Now,
Okay.
this particular guy, by really pulling it out, you could suggest he was Roman because he's got a little bit of Italian
Hmm.
ancestry. Okay, but here's what the last passage from Malachi's prophecy say in English. In the final persecution of the Holy Roman Church, there will reign Peter the Roman, who will feed his flock amid many tribulations, after which the seven-hilled city will be destroyed, and the dreadful judge will judge the people, the end.
Hmm.
Okay, so that's what it says. So people
Wow.
know the seven-hilled city has to do with Rome.
Right, right.
And we see this is happening during the time of tribulation. And the final pontiff, according to my beliefs, as well as I think Roman Catholic prophetic writings, will be an anti-pope and the final
Hmm.
antichrist. And so that would all tie in. There's a prophecy in the book of Revelation, chapter 17,
Mm-hmm.
that shows that the supporters of the beast power will eliminate the power of seven hills,
Okay.
which would be the Church of Rome. So I see a lot of parallels between biblical prophecy and Malachi's prophecy here.
Hmm.
But again, it comes down to, I believe, the biblical ones. But there are very definitely some similarities between the two.
Hmm. Wow, that's interesting. I never heard of that prophecy, to tell you the truth, the Malachi prophecy. That's a brand new one on me.
Yeah, well, brand new one came out in the year 1139.
No.
Well, but again, it was hidden for centuries. Came out in 1590, and
Okay.
I first learned about it. Oh, I don't know, probably about 20 years ago when I bought that
Okay.
book in the 60s, and I read it. Okay, this is interesting, and
Hmm.
again, particularly because it seemed like it was somewhat accurate. And again, I believe that the demons gave Malachi the message, so we don't know which parts are going to be true or not. Uh, and but the reality is, I do think we're getting closer to the time of the end. We're
I
getting
believe
closer
that.
to the
Yeah.
time of the final Antichrist. Um, and we'll see if it possibly could be Pope Leo. He's doing a couple of things that could be setting the stage for it. For
Hmm.
example, there's a Greco-Roman Catholic prophecy that says a pontiff is going to rise up who will unite the East and the West.
Hmm.
And again,
Hmm.
uh, within hours of him being elected, being announced, the Patriarch of Constantinople thanked him, and then
Hmm.
they talked within a couple of days, I believe, and then they started talking about when they could get together and have meetings and such. So whether or not he is the last one, I do think he
Hmm.
is going to likely help with the ecumenical dialogue, particularly almost everything I've heard him say so far
Hmm.
is leaning definitely in that direction,
Hmm. 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 Yeah.
moving toward what we'll call a one world religion.
Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely something that I kind of like picked up on when I really started teaching the Book of Revelation a couple times that I've taught it. I said, this is pretty clear about a one world religion, because anything that looks like a lamb but speaks like a dragon is definitely something that can unite all the churches.
Right, and that's
You
and
know.
that and that I believe that particular prophecy that you're referring to, which is in Revelation 13, starting verse 11.
Mm-hmm.
This is talking about the false prophet, which I believe will be a pontiff. It'll be an anti-pope because I don't he won't we know he can't be a regular pope. Let's just talk about why for a moment.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Martin Luther believed that the papacy was the Antichrist. And throughout, ever since bishops of Rome called themselves popes,
Mm-hmm.
people have suggested that they are the Antichrist. Okay. But as we get closer, you have to think about this. If he does what he's supposed to do, if you read Revelation 13, I could pull out a Bible and read it now, but I'll paraphrase it. This guy who looks like a lamb, has horns like a lamb, but speaks like a dragon, ends up telling people to do what? Worship the beast. He doesn't
Yeah.
tell people to
Yeah.
worship Jesus.
Right. Right.
Okay.
Right. Right. Right.
As much as I disagree with many changed teachings of the Greco-Roman churches, they don't tell you to do emperor worship yet, at least
Right.
not directly,
Right.
at least
Right.
not the
Right.
ones I've heard. And that's what this guy's going to do. You say, but
Hmm.
wait a second, would a pope do that? If he's an anti-pope, yes. And so I think that will happen. As I mentioned before, you read in Revelation 17, verses, let's say 15 through 18,
Mm-hmm.
that supporters of the beast destroy what I'll call the Roman church, the church of the seven hills. They didn't destroy this other guy. How do we know that? Because the false prophet does not get destroyed until Jesus returns, and which you can read about Revelation 19,
Exactly.
right?
Right.
So
Right.
you've got a
Right.
guy who's around who I think was originally claimed to be Roman Catholic, who's
Mm-hmm.
telling people to worship the beast. He doesn't get destroyed when the Church of Rome gets destroyed. He's still around until Jesus comes there, and then it's over for this guy.
Hmm.
And that's
Hmm.
that's some things that a lot of people do not realize when they read the Book of Revelation. So it's not that the final pope is going to be a Roman Catholic the way I've understood it, and most people understand it. Because again, otherwise, you wouldn't see one telling people to worship the beast, and that he's going to switch over toward the beast.
Right. 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 Well, there's a lot of stuff to unpack when it comes to the Antichrist, the Antipope. Those are terms that are kind of new to me. The Antichrist is not new, but the
Of
Antipope
course
is
not.
very, very new to me. So
Yes.
I gotta dig and do my research on that. So, but when we look at it, we know a couple things. I know that's going to happen. I know there's going to be a one world religious system. I know there's going to be a one world government. So we've been moving towards a one world government for the last 50 years.
Yeah, we're going to move toward it, but not all the pieces are going to be totally in there.
Right,
Like,
right,
like
right,
for example, and I know we're kind of running out of time, but let me make a brief comment. You read in Revelation 13 that all the world worships the beast.
right.
Okay, you think, how can that happen? Well, within Hinduism, they're looking for a leader to rise up called the Bhagwan Kalki, who, by the
Hmm.
way, is supposed to rise up around now or the next 10 years. Okay, all right, and he sounds an awful lot like the beast power. Then you've got Chinese prophecies that say that in the time of the end, beautiful people come from the West, like Europe. China now has a saint. Chinese don't have saints, but he's not that good of a person. Aha, the Antichrist.
Hmm.
So they're set for that. What about Islam? Okay, Islam is a trickier one. The
Yes,
reality
they
is,
are. Yeah.
the reality is, and I've been to Turkey multiple times, but at least Ephesus twice, and they actually hold a celebration for Jesus' mother Mary every year. These are Muslims.
Wow, I never knew that.
Yes, they hold a feast for Mary every year. That's at least that's what they claim. I suspect, and I mentioned about Fatima before, I'm going to try to tie all this in. I suspect that instead of having an apparition that's only seen by three little kids or some old lady in an attic or whatever, that we may actually see what I call a Marian apparition in public.
Hmm.
Remember, the restrainer is supposed to be taken out of his place, according to Second Thessalonians 2. And apparently, God will allow Satan to have some signs that we didn't see before because we're going to
Hmm.
see all these signs additional signs and lying wonders. I believe when that comes out, that even Islam will temporarily accept this because the Bible says all world versus beast. Well, how are you going to do that if Islam won't do it at all? So I think this will be temporal. And the reason I say that is one, Muslims will quickly realize that the Crusaders were the ones that bothered them before, and they're going to not like certain things about this religion. But
Mm.
secondly, if you read the book of Daniel, chapter 11,
Mm-hmm.
verses 40 to 43, and actually earlier there, you see there's going to be a deal made between the king of the north and the king of the south. And the Bible says it's a lying deal. They
Mm.
lie to each other. Okay. Then, verse 40, you see the king of the south gets tired of this and he attacks the king of the north and he loses. The beast beats him. The king of the north destroys him. But to me, that's consistent with them temporarily worshiping the beast and then uh, quickly going against it.
Mm.
So I think what we'll have is not a full one world government, but kind of a one world confederation,
Mm.
and then we'll see different pieces eventually break off of it.
Mm. Wow. Well, Dr. Thiel, where can we get your book at?
Well, these books, these ones are available at Amazon.com, and
Okay.
sadly, because they also have a Kindle version, I can't give these away free. But the
Okay.
other books that we have, and we've got at least a dozen other books. The ebooks are all free. You just
Okay.
can't do that with Amazon with a couple of the books I have, but
Okay.
they're free. You can find them at ccog.org, or you can find them at Cogwriter, 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 and they're
Okay.
there. You can read them, pray about them, check it out, check out our script, check out the scriptures, check out the references to see if these things are so. Be like the Bereans of old, Acts 8,
Mm.
17.
Okay. Definitely. You got any last words of encouragement or advice or any information you could tell our readers to look out for with these last days coming upon us?
The Apostle Paul said Christians are to walk by faith, not by sight. And
Mm.
my concern is most people, according to Second Thessalonians chapter 2, are going to fall by sight.
Yeah.
And during Jesus' day, he warned about people who follow traditions of men. And my concern, one of my many concerns, is a lot of their prophetic understanding is really based upon traditions of men and not the word of God.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
Yeah.
getting back to what I've said several times so far, we all should contend earnestly for the faith once for all delivered to the saints. I believe that's in the Bible. And you mentioned about books and stuff that we have. We have free books on church history that
Okay.
document what early Christians believed. And if people want to learn more about the original faith, those are all free, by the way. You can find them at ccog.org or cogrudder.com.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again, Dr. Teal, for being on Clergy Talk Podcast. You always educate me every time you come on this show. You did it the first time. You did it again. I should have got it down on my notes. I'm gonna have to look at this again myself so I can take some notes and look up some stuff. So, with that being said, you continue doing what you're doing. If you ever get any new insight on anything, shoot me an email. I'll bring you back on here.
Well, I'll be on almost every day under that. So we'll see. I'd love to be on again, Michael. We'll just see how when our schedules work again.
Definitely, definitely. Well, we'll figure out something. Just let me know what you got coming on, and I'll get you in here somewhere.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. You have a great day.
You too.